Hello, beautiful community. Welcome to this month's edition of the Nourishing Woman podcast, where we're having conversations to nourish women, body, mind, and spirit. I'm so excited for today. I know I say that a lot, but I'm really excited for today because I have someone to bring to you who has been such an instrumental part of my growth over the last, probably close to 2 years now. And it has just been such a beautiful blessing in my life to be able to talk to and to learn from and be supported by my good friend, Melissa Windell. Melissa is a psychic medium and really healer. She helps you open you up to all the areas in your life where you may be feeling stuck, where you kind of forget who you are sometimes, and really offers you in a beautiful, loving way guidance, support, and tools, which is something that I know in her field. Not everybody's got a bag of tools, right, that they can offer, and all of the tools have been really supportive. And so I just value her so much in my life, in the world. And so to bring her to you is making me very happy today. She's got a fantastic, incredible story of healing that I know is going to inspire you. So I don't want to take any more time. I just want to go ahead and bring you Melissa, and thank you so much for spending this time. I know that time is precious. So the fact that you're willing to come and be with me, my community, really means a lot. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. I think this is such a gift to get to share heart connection and stories and a little bit of journeys with each other. So I'm really grateful to be here, and I love what you do. I think it's so crucial, especially in our society where image seems to be the root of so many choices we make in our life, and how to feel in right relationship with our self-image, I think, is, and how we feel about our bodies, I think, is instrumental. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. I'm glad that you said it because it's not all about, I consider it to be such a big part of my practices is developing that healthy relationship with your own body. Even while you're working to become your healthiest version, or the version that matches who you feel in the inside, to still have that love and respect for your body. So important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it truly is. I mean, how you feel about yourself is how you internally is how you interact and engage with the world. And whether you feel full or empty is totally rooted in that.
Absolutely.
Itself. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you've got a very interesting and inspiring story of healing. And I would really love, that's kind of what I want to dive into and share with people, because when we see how other people go about it and know that it's possible for them, it really helps resonate with us that that could be for me too.
Mhm.
So would you just kind of take us through a little bit, maybe some of the background that we need to understand, and then how it played out for you, how you got from, the struggle into where you are now?
Yeah, wonderful. I'm actually excited to share. I love the story and the journey of my relationship with food and my body. I think it's been instrumental. So, if you don't mind, I just kind of want to take a moment and just take a deep breath in right now and just kind of ground and connect in just into my heart and into my body so I can really relax into this space together with you and your community. All right. Well, thank you. So, like Lori said, I am a psychic and a medium and a healer, and the spiritual path has been one that I've been walking on for a solid 20, 22 years now, where I've been really aware of it, and spirituality has started becoming language in my life. Um, in 2006, I went to a school, North American Institute of Medical Herbalism, and one of the huge foundations in the herbal school was nutrition. And I remember I'm still actually, I don't think I have a lot of anymore, but I still was moving through a lot of shame up until this last year of 2021. So much of that school focused on removing dairy allergies, gluten allergies. The root of healing the body with medicinal herbalism was rooted in nutrition and what you put in your body. And going to this beautiful school with these tremendously amazing, human, intelligent, in touch human beings, um, that were so radical and so passionate about their food. And I remember feeling so much shame because I couldn't get on board with it. And I remember I was working at Vitamin Cottage. I was also going to a school called Psychic Horizons to work on my intuitive part of my life, which is really where my passion lied. And I remember looking at this naturopath that I worked with, and we were talking about eliminating the food. And I just remember, I'm kind of a cusser, so I hope you can love me with it. But I was like, I am such a bitch without my food. Like, I love my gluten and I love my dairy. And he looked at me and said, you know what serves you more, eliminating the food or your general overall happiness? And I chose my happiness with my relationship with the food that I love. And knowing that, so basically so the thing that we learned in school was to eliminate a food, wait 6 weeks, reintroduce it, wait 4 days, and introduce it again. And the theory was that your body would have time to create antibodies to attack the food if it doesn't serve your body.
Yeah.
So I eliminated dairy and I eliminated gluten. And basically, when I reintroduced gluten, I got the craziest rounds of diarrhea. And dairy gives me major constipation. So in my head, I was like, oh, no, I'm balanced. If I eat dairy and I eat gluten, then I like have a little bit of diarrhea, a little bit of constipation, which will just make a nice balance.
It's even all the time.
Totally. So I've lived with that mentality for that was in 2006, we're in 2022, right? So quite a few years, right? And so I've chosen to eat them knowing that it just hasn't served me. And I remember going out to we were really big in community and having potlucks. And I just always felt so ashamed hanging out with them because they were also, I dare to say the word righteous in their food, right? But they were. And I remember I would make something and they would ask me is it dairy free? Is it this? Which of course, it kind of pissed me off because I was like, yeah, I know my audience, right?
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
not to make dairy for all of you, right? But but it was a shame because they all knew that I hadn't gotten on board.
Yeah.
And when you're making an investment in your education, which I didn't realize going to herb school was I thought I was saying yes to learning about herbs. I didn't realize I was saying yes to changing my entire lifestyle and who I was.
Yeah.
So, and I wasn't ready for that change in lifestyle. So fast forward all these
years. Can I ask, do you feel like some of the restriction, even in the mindset, because even though you were allowing it, the shame probably made it feel like there was some restriction with it. Do you feel like, or maybe there were times when you tried to push yourself into it, even though you didn't feel the readiness or the ease? Was there a time, or do you feel like it fueled some of your behavior with the food, like it made it harder, or, that it was just more of a struggle because of the shame behind it, because it wasn't fully allowed necessarily, even though you didn't take it out, there was still some restriction around it?
Yeah, I think more than, if I'm hearing your question correctly, I think more than anything, Lori, it always made me feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I love food and I'm actually a really good cook and I eat really healthy for the most part, but I do love my bread.
Mm-hmm.
And I love dairy, but not the way I love bread. And every single meal for all these years, it's like every time I eat bread, I have this like voice in the back of my head of that school, those people,
Sure.
that I never stepped to the challenge to change.
Mhm.
So it's like, even though I loved it, there's a part of me that always felt guilty
Sure.
and and not in alignment with myself. But the thing was that I never felt strong enough to change.
Yeah.
Like I remember, so then within like a year of that school, I got pregnant. And I actually did make a change at at that stage in my life that I got pregnant. I had gone completely gluten and dairy free. So I actually was
Okay.
like I was eating burgers for breakfast. That was like just the hamburger
Yeah.
with like hummus and like mango pico de gallo sauce like on it. Like I was eating crazy healthy, and
Yeah.
I got pregnant like that, probably because my body was at a higher vibration. Um, and then being pregnant with her, with my daughter, and having a lack of funds at that time, I had to eat, because part of changing your lifestyle is also connected to how much money you have, right?
Absolutely.
To eliminate those. But also when you
Yeah.
think about it, like my teacher said once, he said, um, when you go to the grocery store, try just to shop around the edges of the grocery store
Yeah,
and not
exactly.
the aisles,
Mhm.
and really like the aisles is like all the boxed food, all the pre-packaged stuff, which can actually be quite expensive as well, right? So it's actually quite cheaper in some ways just to shop with vegetables and meat, right? But anyways, so okay, so after that, my diet changed a little bit. I've actually, it's like weaved in and out where like I've always eaten pretty healthy. And sometimes I have the strength to change my diet and to go without with those restrictions. But then something always, I noticed that no matter, I've lived with a lot of different people in my life, especially after having my daughter. Um, because I chose to be a single mother after about a year and a half of her being in this world.
Mhm.
Um, that I would change my diet with whoever I lived with.
Sure.
So if I lived with someone who ate really healthy, I would kind of adopt their diet. If I lived with someone who ate pizza all the time, I was like, heck yeah, I want to eat pizza all the time. So I
Sure.
would, and I noticed I had like no strength. I had no self-control around it.
Mhm.
And I've spent a lot of time looking at why are my weaknesses, and being an intuitive and a healer and somebody who's obsessed with shadow work, specifically my own shadow work,
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time in reflection of like why is this certain way. So I know that when I was 12 years old, my mom started working full time from nine in the morning to 11 at night, and my dad started taking care of us. And my dad was kind of a typical male in his generation that just was not emotionally connected or involved,
Yep.
and really just became kind of an absent father. So at 12, I kind of became parentless in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And we lived off of pot pies and frozen meals. And I remember at one point I couldn't eat another frozen meal. Like
Mhm.
it was making me nauseous. And so my dad said, fine, figure it out, make your own food. Well, I was 12 and nobody had ever taught me how to cook.
Yeah.
So I just started eating cereal and toast. And basically that's what I lived off of, was cereal, toast, and donuts and chips.
Mm.
So
Yeah, and so,
basically,
those foods, if you look at it and think of it, talk about, dopamine, comfort, and just, providing maybe some of the support that you were longing for and needing as a 12-year-old girl.
yeah. Oh yeah. And I would notice that like in my adult years, those were still my comfort foods.
Mhm.
And that's basically what I lived off of. Was I'd wake up and I always liked eggs. So eggs has always been a staple in my diet. but toast and crackers, and I'm a sucker for donuts. And like my family knows. It's funny. They come to my house and it's like full of like healthy food, but you go to any of my family's house and it's full of junk food, and I become like a crazed maniac. Like the first thing I do is I like ravage their kitchen for all the cookies, all the chocolate, because I don't have it in my own house. And I'm very much known as like the cookie monster, right? So, and it's just because it's like those are all of my weaknesses. So knowing all of these, but yet not being able to like emotionally overcome them. So last year I was 39, knowing that I was going to be turning 40 in October. And I had noticed the year prior that I'm kind of the baby of all of my friends,
Okay.
that a lot of my friends, the minute they turned 40, they started having like all these health issues.
Yeah.
And so at 38, going into 39, I was like, I really want 2021 to be my year of like health. I want to go into turning 40 being the healthiest place I've been into, to kind of hopefully counter react whatever happens at 40, right? So knowing that, all year long, I really struggled. I couldn't make the commitment. Like I knew that it was the year I wanted to make the commitment to my health, but it just wasn't happening. So I'm going to go backwards. About 3 or 4 years ago, I worked with this amazing chiropractor who does a lot of NET, neuro-emotional technique.
Okay.
And he looked at me one day, and he said, what happened to you? What happened to you like at birth? And I knew that I had a lot of trauma with my mom around breastfeeding, but I didn't really quite understand why. And I've known this like growing up through like different ceremonies and spiritual awakenings, that I have a lot of like deep rooted birth mama trauma. I liked how that rhymed, mama trauma. That's something I really want to relate to, but it's there.
It is.
And so I asked my mom, and my mom doesn't remember anything ever. And I was like, Mom, like, you know what happened when I was like born and like the first 2 years of my life? And she was like, oh my God. I was like, oh, what, you actually remember something? And she was like, yeah, I remember. So it was actually 2 months in the womb. And she said, because two different things came up in NET. It was like my birth story and then 2 months in the womb. And so the 2 months in the womb, she said, I remember finding out that I was pregnant with you and we didn't want to be pregnant. I knew I wanted to have another child, but not for a while. And I remember being really pissed. We didn't have health insurance. We were broke, which is a total root to some financial scarcity that I had in my life. So that broke open a huge piece of my healing journey, to let go of scarcity and like limited unconscious blocks. But she said something that was interesting. She was like, and I was pissed. She said, so my sister's 1.5 years older than me, and it's just us two. And she said, yeah, my mother-in-law, my grandmother, was so adamant that my mom breastfed with my sister, and she knew that she was going to be adamant that she breastfed with me. And she was like, I was so sick of breastfeeding that I knew like I was just going to be pissed because now I had to breastfeed again. And like she was going to like, Grandma Vi, she's like, I was going to be on my butt about it, and I remember being really mad at my grandma, like, because I was mad at my grandma because my mom was upset.
Sure.
But in hindsight, I was like, Grandma was just looking out for me. She wanted my mom. She knew the benefits of breast milk and of breastfeeding, and she was trying to like help that relationship.
Her intentions were very pure. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So fast forward, when my mom started breastfeeding me, she intentionally ate as poorly as she could in hopes that I would reject her milk. And so I got really sick from my mom's breast milk, which my mom on her side was like, hallelujah, thank God. But what happened to me, so my mom basically lived off of cigarettes and chocolate. while she nursed me. So that was my first nutrients
Right.
in the womb and in breast milk was chocolate milk, because she did drink a lot of chocolate milk, um, and chocolate and cigarettes. And then she put me, so I got really sick, and I was getting sick from malnourishment. So then she put me on formula. Well, I had a total dairy allergy. So I was getting more sick from the formula. Well,
Mhm.
this is beautiful. She randomly found this woman that gave her herbs. So she put three different types of herbs in my breast in the formula so I could digest the formula. Yeah, which I
How
thought was
cool is that?
really cool.
As your start. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And you
Yeah.
bring up such an important aspect of this journey, which is, our traumas essentially. And someone may look at this and say, oh, it's not so bad. Can we really label it a trauma? And yes, absolutely. Because as a little baby who is developing your nervous system in the womb, and sometimes we don't realize that our traumas start oftentimes in the womb. Either, your mom was feeling that stress, her, probably anxiety. She labels it as being pissed, but it was, frustration, it was fear, anxiety, whatever it was. Those chemicals were put into your developing nervous system. And
Mhm.
then as you, grew up and started to be fed again, it's the whole atmosphere, not getting the nutrients you need. It put your body in high alert, in a stress state, which further impacted your nervous system. So you're, going into your first year of life with a nervous system that is on high alert. And so when you talk about, I didn't have I didn't, what did you say? It was something like, the comments about I didn't have the strength, or I didn't have the ability, whatever it was, to make these changes. And it is so important for us to understand that when our nervous systems are stuck in high alert, from the time we were little, that carries forward. And so much of the struggle, could have been as a result of your nervous system being in that state of high alert and needing to protect you. And restriction is the opposite of protection, right?
Mhm.
So it all kind of makes a lot of sense here. Yeah.
Yeah, and you brought up like so many great points, right? Which I'm glad you brought up, because these are some of the things that I wanted to talk about, right? There is so much trauma coming from how she was feeling in her body the minute she
Yeah.
found out she was pregnant. And being as energetically sensitive as I am, and as all of us are, we instantly are receiving that in the womb. And there was a sense of depletion, disconnection.
Mm.
And then anybody that's ever studied any type of attachment theories, it's funny, my sister is always in a relationship. And no matter what I do, I can never be in a relationship. And it's because she was breastfed her first year in her life. She had that attachment,
Secure.
connection, and
Yeah.
security where I never did. So I've always been raised energetically with an anxious attachment style, because I never had that deep connection with my mom, because my mom was constantly trying to push me off of her. And also too, so energetically, the minute that we are conceived, and you probably know this, you might have talked about it, right? But um the minute we are conceived, we are made of all of our dad's blood and all of our mom's blood. So we get all of our dad's lineage and DNA,
Mhm.
and whatever he's experiencing in that stage in his life, and then all of our mother's lineage, DNA, and whatever she's experiencing in that life. And the minute that we are conceived, we get both of those stories put into our body. And I
Absolutely.
often say, like, we spend our entire adulthoods getting them out of our blood and out of our unconscious,
Right, for sure.
so we can become more of who we want to be and what is our soul's authentic expression, right? um so in that moment of conceiving, it was, I've actually lately, I've been wanting to ask my mom, like, what was their experience leading up to their making love with me,
Mhm,
right,
mhm.
when I was conceived. But I know just from that story that they were that they were exhausted from having a newborn, a
Yeah.
year and a half year. At that point, she was only like 6 months old, or
Right.
whatever that math
Yeah.
is, really. They had no insurance. They were both trying to figure out how to make bills being met. And my mom chose like an unhealthy lifestyle, right? So, plus all their other stuff. So, unconsciously, if you look back to my like going into my mom's house and my sister's house and eating all the junk food, right? That was my sense of nourishment and connection from my mom's food,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't so much me going into the house, eating all of the cookies and eating all the sugar. It was my mom's patterning. So it's this like
Right.
unconscious patterning and programming that's in my nervous system. It's in my blood. It's also in my awareness, because those first 7 years of our life is where we get all of our programming, how we operate. So it was like the minute I go and get around this junk food, I no longer, it's like I no longer had seniority or authority of my body.
Yeah.
It's like my inner child who felt so depleted and neglected. And those foods felt like comfort and love and nourishment.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially in the atmosphere in which you sought it and was looking for it. Yeah. And we find a way, and that was brilliant, right? And so often we're like, we hate that behavior, or we really get down on ourselves and the shame that you spoke of. But really, when we look at it, it's really kind of brilliant, right? That little girl found a way to be nourished in the best possible way that she could. And so I look at that and I think, what beauty in our ability to care for ourselves. Doesn't mean we always have to do that. We can learn, as you are, like, we can understand these patterns and then shift out of them when we know better. But, having that compassion for the little girl and even, recognizing how brilliant that was.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for bringing a different perspective and shining a different light. Like, I never thought about that. Like, yeah, every time I go into my mom's house, it's like my little girl gets to feel full.
Yeah.
And nourished, but my adult self felt the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And so there's like this internal struggle. And I see that so clearly now that you've brought that up, where I didn't see that before. So thank you for that. Um, so so something else that I want to bring up too, and then I want to go back to the story is, so growing up, my sister has always been overweight, like heavier set than I've been. We're like the same height, but we have two totally different builds. And we also have two different lifestyles. And I think that this is important. I went through a stage around that 12-year-old stage where I were like, it was the alternative skater stage for anyone in my generation, right? It's
Awesome.
like Nirvana, like, all of that, right? So I were like the baggiest clothes you could ever find. And she came to me one day and she said, God, Melissa, and I think this is really important. And she said, I wish I had your body for one day. Do you know what I would wear if I had your body for one day? And it was such a turnkey moment in my consciousness of, I really need to love my body and not hide it. And I started changing. I started changing what I wore. I started changing how I felt about my body, how I cared about my body. And it's something that I've always had deep gratitude for her for bringing that awareness.
Yeah.
And also, I want to honor my sister that, we would go to a club and we would leave the club and she would be surrounded by men. And I'd be standing there like, can we go home yet? And she also, she flaunts her body so beautifully and decorates it. She's always really been into fashion and hair and makeup, and I could always care less about that stuff. Where there's been a beautiful celebration of her body type and my body type. And I know that she's had to work really hard on that. And these last 2 years, she has a really healthy relationship, and she wears shorts that show her cellulite. And I love it. I'm like,
Absolutely, right?
I'm like,
Who
go you.
says
So
that
empowering.
yeah, who says that any way is the right way? It's ridiculous. And the more we can embrace, the beauty in every single form, the freer we all become. So
Yeah.
good for her. I am celebrating her too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that piece. So fast forward. So last year, going 39 into my 40s. So at this point, it's like going into March and I'm like not able to make the food. It's going into like May and I'm not able to make the food. And I knew that like my last weakness was bread. I was like, I'm really struggling with the bread piece. And all of a sudden it dawned on me one day. I had this memory. I think I was eating a donut or had a memory of eating a donut. And all of a sudden, that memory, I was like, why do I love donuts so much?
Mm.
And I had this memory of being really young. It apparently it all comes back to 12 years old. It was when I had my first job, and it was with my dad. My dad ran a mason business, which, if anybody knows what that is, he laid brick for a living. And so he took me to work with him. That was my first job, construction site, laying brick, right? Which I love that side of myself. But every day before we'd go to work, we'd stop at the donut shop and we'd get like a whole box of donuts. And I got to eat as many donuts as I wanted. And it was like the best day ever. Like we would hang out, I'd like move cement around. They call it mud. It's like wet cement, right? He'd lay the brick and I'd eat donuts. It was like epic. Um, but all of a sudden, I'm like reflecting on this memory, and I was like, I've always thought that I loved donuts. And I was like, it wasn't the donuts that I loved. It was the only time that I felt unconditional love from my dad. And the donuts, the sweet food, the bread was more than the bread. It was me unconsciously on a soul level connecting to what I was always been hungry for, is this unconditional love from my dad.
It was the vehicle.
It was the vehicle. And in that moment, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with bread. I'm ready. I'm now ready. And so I knew that I wanted to do something. I know I needed support. I needed like a guidebook. I needed something that felt a little bit more grounding to help me in my change for my relationship with food. So I reached out to that chiropractor, the one that does the NET, and he's really good with food. But that wasn't quite lining up. And I reached out to my girlfriend who's doing like a detox every single time I talk to her.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you have just a book that could help me? And she introduced me to Whole30. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to like start it tomorrow. Well, I get this book. It's a 400-page book.
Right.
And I was like, so I spent an entire month reading the book because I was like, I don't want to just like change this diet for like just until I turn 40. Like, I really want to change my relationship with this book. And that relationship talked about exactly that language. It talked about changing your relationship with food. So I spent the next 6 weeks deeply reading this entire book and getting to the recipes and having all these different like epiphanies. And they give you some homework. So I did some journaling with it. And then in August, I committed to it. I couldn't wait to start, right? Went on a 2-week vacation with my daughter and I wanted to start when came back. And so I started the Whole30, and the craziest thing happened. So Whole30 basically is a paleo diet. You cut out sugar, breads, like no corn, no rice, no quinoa, no wheat, no sugar, no dairy. So vegetables and meat, right? And I realized I totally have a sugar dragon, which is what they call it. I'm still kind of struggling with the sugar dragon a little bit. But I did it for a solid 60 days straight by the book. And then I slowly started reintroducing things just to see, like, how does my body respond to rice? How does it respond to soy? I haven't introduced gluten because I just know I don't want it. But the strangest thing happened in that first 30 days. One, I lost weight, which was awesome. I was getting at the top of where I wanted to be. But the other greatest thing happened was I was confident.
Mm.
And I realized it had nothing to do with losing weight or feeling like stronger in my body. The confidence, Lori, came from feeling like I finally had control over myself and my body.
Yeah.
Where this entire time in my life, I had never had control over food.
Yeah.
Food always controlled me. And feeling like I could finally control food made me feel more confident in every aspect of my life because I could finally control the rest of my life.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's so many things about how you went about it, right? And how you noticed through your life, like you tried it and you just knew like it wasn't going to work, or it wasn't the time. And it was by reaching back to the roots of that you were able to succeed, that it was able to let go of its power over you. It served a high purpose until it didn't anymore. And at the point where it stopped serving that purpose, then it kind of falls away,
Mhm.
and that is what is so important for people to understand, instead of putting all of our effort into controlling myself when I'm, standing at the refrigerator, or when I'm, whatever, in the moment, trying to control myself in the moment, we don't have power there. Our power lies in understanding ourselves, having compassion for ourselves, and meeting our needs in a way that makes the food no longer the thing that meets our needs. And then at that point, we just simply can let go. It can let go of us, we can let go of it. And it's the food is such a, probably because we're interacting with it all the time. So when you had that sense, that you didn't have control, you were constantly being reminded, you're a person without control. And that spilled over, because as we do one thing, we do everything. That spilled over into the other areas of your life, and the confidence that you had. I can build my business, I can serve people, I can be a great mom, I can, on and on and on. Meanwhile, the messages from the food is like, no, you can't, you don't control things, you don't do what you want, you don't, so being able to do that, now you're like being fed the opposite messages all day long. I am somebody with agency. I am someone who makes my decisions and can act in a way in my best interest. And so the way you're doing that is coming out in the way that you're doing the rest of your life. And it is so powerful. I love what you said. It's
Yeah.
not about the food. It's about, what's behind it.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and I'm sure this is something I'm almost positive this is something you work with a lot, but it's like when you're standing at the fridge and you're making those choices, it's like taking a moment and just a pause of like, what, and this is like where you get to like deepen with your connection with yourself.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that my body's really wanting? How old am I feeling right now?
Yeah,
What is it
exactly.
I'm really trying to feed, or what am I avoiding? And taking that moment just to like breathe and just listen, and then making a choice like, I feel like I'm 6 years old and I want candy because I feel neglected right now. And then sitting there and being like, okay, well, do I still want candy, or do I want something else?
Exactly.
And
You just
having
described one of my most powerful tools, which is called the 2-minute pause. And it just opens that opportunity, right? That's where our power is, when we can, in between, we have that place that Viktor Frankl talks about, the place in between stimulus and our reaction. We have a choice right there. And when we can stop and connect into our higher self that has these answers, that knows what we're truly needing, when we can stop and reflect and ask the question, then we can make a conscious choice, as opposed to just going down that same habituated pathway that we've been down time and time again. And but I will say too that there is, before you can do that, it's not as simple as that, right? Because that's a tall order. standing in that moment, because in that moment, very often we feel we're in survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, we're being driven by our primitive brain. Our primitive brain is not interested in our long-term goals, is not interested in, creative solutions. It wants to protect you right now in this moment, and often doesn't let you even slow down. You just like wake up afterwards and you're like, why did I do that again? I didn't even feel like I was involved in that decision. I didn't feel like it was a decision. I was a robot in that moment. And so there's actually, I would call, pre-work that I help people do in order to get to that point. And then it's exciting. You get to that point, and those moments where you're at the refrigerator become gifts, because then they provide that window into what you're talking about, that deep insight into the places of us that just want attention and want to be seen and heard. And when we are able to stand in that moment, see and hear those parts, they tell us what we truly need, and we can provide it. And at that point, like I was saying before, the food no longer serves us. It doesn't do what we want it to do. So it loses its luster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like your impulse and your anxiety with the impulse can kind of start to relax, where you can go more into your parasympathetic nervous system, and it doesn't have to be so out of the body experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the body. Yeah, I think it's really telling, and just knowing where I'm at with like food now, so I've been doing the Whole30 since August of 2021, so about
6 months, 6 months.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's like, at that point, you really just start to feel like this is just who I am.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that started feeling really good was I was realizing, wow, like how much empty food I was eating.
Mm.
And like just earlier today I made lunch for my daughter, and as I'm like making lunch, I was like, God, it's so colorful. And it's like so beautiful, and she doesn't have quite as much appreciation yet for it, but it doesn't matter. I have appreciation for it,
Sure. Yeah. As a
You know?
nourishing, beautiful,
Mhm.
instead of that contention, like I really shouldn't be eating this. And is it, even if, our taste buds like it, the rest of us is just like, this isn't consistent with who I want to be. There is no, joy.
Yeah. Yeah, and just feeling good about what you're putting in. Like I made like a warm kale salad and some sweet potatoes and some fried eggs, and it was just like,
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like
I
my
know.
body could like
Yes.
feel it.
Yes. There's something I'll never forget as I made my change into, nourishing food. And I remember I used to have all these so many rules, and nuts was not allowed because, nuts had too many calories. And even though now I realize like nuts are a incredible food and everything, but I never allowed myself to have nuts in a way where they could be enjoyed. I might, I might binge on them and have to, and then like the whole time swearing against them, swearing against myself that I was doing this. And I'll never forget the first time I had a handful of cashews where I wasn't caught up in that fright and struggle and shame. And after, as soon as I ate them and actually felt them in my body, felt so nourished by the food. And it kind of introduced me to that feeling and that connection in my body, that I could actually tell what my body was needing and wanting to feel nourished. And that was just such a start of a beautiful relationship where where I'd never experienced joy with food. It was always the enemy, right? And so now, like you're describing, like I get so excited. I'll take pictures of my food, and then I'll eat food and I'll look down. I'll be like, I'm so glad there's food left on my plate to keep, so that I can keep eating it. And it's like, it blows my mind that I can have such joy with my food. And I do think that is available. And I also think that when we have that, we feel nourished in a way that doesn't leave us searching for more and more things. When we eat the food, our stomachs aren't hungry, but we haven't had that satiated experience yet. And so we continue eat past that point, just looking for, finally getting that sense of nourishment. But it's not going to come from the volume. It's going to come from, number one, enjoying it as a spiritual experience, and number two, giving our bodies what they actually need. So I love that so much. I love that you get to experience that, and that it's spilled over into the confidence that you can now have in every area of your life. Just so beautiful. And congratulations, because you had the patience and the intuition, and was willing to do the work to find out what is underneath this. And I think that, like you said, once you discovered that, the path was just so easy in comparison to the attempts that you made and wanted to make in the past.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's been like 20 years I've been working with my relationship with food, and it's taken me, in some ways, unfortunately, that long to uncover so many of the different
Yeah.
roots
Yeah.
to my
Yeah.
habits and my patterns. But I'm so grateful I stuck with it.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I kept getting curious.
Absolutely. Yes, that
Mhm.
curiosity, because you have all the answers, right?
Mhm.
And really, and my own journey taking, decades as well. And so as I created the Freedom Program, it was like, I knew the pieces that were involved, the pieces that had, helped me and helped other people. And so, it's the program itself is a year. But when you think about that, right, when you think about this year with all of these pieces, with your limiting beliefs, with your inner child work, with all the various pieces that we're looking at, a year is like that, right? Compared to how long people may have been struggling already, and how long, so it doesn't mean, because your journey was a long one, it doesn't mean that it has to take that long. People should know, like, it can be, with the right kind of focus, right? And with the right working one-on-one and things like that. So, but it's a beautiful journey, regardless of, the length or the time. There's so much that you learned along the way too, and so much beauty. And now you get to give that to your daughter.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And working, yeah, that's like a whole nother story. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
And working
exactly.
with that, she's 13, so working with self-image and
Could not have come at a better time.
yeah, totally. Yeah, and making her eat warm kale salad is comical, but I'm grateful because I've raised her with pretty healthy food. So,
Mhm.
her first real food she ever had was lamb that I made for her and put it in a baby
Yeah.
food jar, so
Yeah.
I've raised her really healthy, but making her eat it. Like, I give her some of her good and then I give her some of my good,
Right. Yeah.
compromise. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
compromise, so.
Yeah. It's beautiful though that you have that to share with her and to be an example, and all of that. So this has been so wonderful, so inspiring, so fascinating too, right? It's human psychology, and it's incredibly just a gift to be able to see your journey, for you to give us that, inside look into um what this has looked like for you. And so I just really appreciate your authenticity today, and letting us, benefit from this journey. I know that people are going to want to learn more about you, be in touch with you. How can they do that?
Yeah, beautiful. So, you can always go to my website, earthfeatherhealings.com, and from there you can learn a lot more about me, what it's like to work with me. Also, I have a psychic school program that helps people that are empaths and healers open up in a safe and beautiful manner. And also on there, on my homepage, there's I have a free gift on there if it's something for those of you who are empaths and energetically sensitive. On there is a way to receive 2 free videos, and one of them is 5 Steps to Freedom in Your Body, where we teach you tools how to support your beautiful, empathic, sensitive body with a guided meditation to kind of walk you through those tools. As one way to work with me or to learn more about me if you're interested.
Yeah, yeah. And that connection with body is just, it's invaluable when you're trying to, heal anything,
Yeah.
but especially your relationship with food.
Yeah, and just one last note on that, like working on a spiritual level, being connected to your body is something that you can't have one without the other. They're very parallel. The more you go up, the further rooted in the earth you need to be, the more centered in your body,
Absolutely.
right? So
Yeah.
it all works together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And obviously being rooted in your body is the sense of safety that your nervous system longs for and looks for. So it is important, and certainly a big part of the work that I do with people is helping them. So I love that, even though we have slightly different, um, professions or the way that we help people, there's so many commonalities because healing is healing. And so it all kind of boils down to the same root, um, processes and systems. And so that's amazing. Well, thank you again for sharing with us, for sharing time with us. And I really hope that you guys will check out those free gifts because they are, super important and valuable. And I know that you'll enjoy getting to know Melissa a little bit better. Thanks for spending time with me and on the podcast. And I look forward to, bringing you additional conversations, starting, next month. So thank you all and much love to you.
And also, I just want to say thank you to each of you for listening and being here today. And may you find deeper roots of commitment and breakthroughs and freedom in your body so you can thrive and really live the life that your heart and soul really long to. So, thank you, Lori, for sticking to your life path that helps each person bloom. Thanks.
And you as well. Thank you, my dear.
Mhm.